I thought he'd kick me out of the church, but the old priest just quietly undid his robe. I walked into that church expecting fire and brimstone, but what I got was silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that presses into your ribs and asks, "What the hell are you doing here?" And honestly, I didn't know. I hadn't been inside a church since I came out. Not since the letters started showing up in my mailbox. Not since my father slammed his beer bottle down and told me God didn't make me this way. Not since I learned how holy words could be wielded like blades. But grief has a funny way of dragging you places you swore you'd never go again. The town hadn't changed much since I left for college. Same rusty signs, same grocery store with one working fridge, same church at the top of the hill with its spine-like steeple. What had changed was me. And the fact that my mother, the only person who ever gave a damn about what I felt instead of what I should be, was gone. She died 3 days ago. And now, I stood in the middle of St. Mary's, dressed in black jeans and an old concert tee under my blazer, staring up at a man I hadn't seen in 6 years, Father Thomas. He looked older. His hair had gone entirely white, though he still kept it trimmed neat at the sides like he used to. He was standing at the altar with a silver chalice in his hands when I walked in. The sound of the heavy wooden doors had echoed like a scream. He didn't turn around. So I walked forward, slow, step by step, until I stood a few feet from him, hands shaking in my pockets. "Your mother asked me to say something at the service," he said quietly, still not looking at me. "She wrote it out. I haven't read it yet." My mouth was dry. "She asked me to come." Now he turned. His eyes met mine, pale blue and steady. "You think I'll throw you out, don't you?" he said. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up around the truth. He watched me for a long moment. Then, without a word, he reached up and slowly undid the top button of his robe. Then another. I froze. It was such an odd gesture, intimate in a way that wasn't sexual, but deeply unsettling. Like someone lowering a shield. "What are you doing?" I managed. He set the chalice down. His hands were steady. "Taking this off," he said. "Because I don't want you thinking I need a collar to talk to you. I am not a costume. I'm just a man. And right now, this man is standing in front of someone grieving their mother." I blinked. The tears hit me before I knew they were coming. The funeral was the next morning. Rain soaked the cemetery lawn, turning the dirt to a thick black paste. I stood beside the casket, barely hearing Father Thomas's voice over the wind. When the service ended, people filtered away slowly, giving me polite, awkward nods. Only he stayed. "She loved you," he said softly, after the last car pulled away. "I know. She worried about you." I laughed bitterly. "She worried I was going to hell." He shook his head. "No. She worried you believed that." That silenced me. We stood under the gray sky for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Do you want to come inside for a bit? Warm up?" I hesitated. "It's not a trap," he said. "No sermons. Just coffee." Inside, the church office hadn't changed at all. Same bookshelf packed with theology texts, same desk with a chipped mug full of pens. Father Thomas poured me a cup and handed it over. I held it like a lifeline. "You ever think about leaving this place?" I asked, finally. "Every Sunday." I looked up in surprise. He smiled faintly. "I stayed because of your mother," he said. "And because I've seen what happens when people are told they're too broken to be saved." I swallowed. "You ever feel like you're not supposed to be here?" He nodded slowly. "Every morning." His eyes met mine. "And yet I wake up. I pray. I try again." I looked down at my cup. "I don't believe anymore." "That's okay," he said. I believe enough for both of us. For now. Something cracked inside me at those words. That night, I stayed in my mom's old house, surrounded by silence and dusty furniture. I found her journal. She had underlined a passage near the end. If love is of God, and I love my son, then my son cannot be far from him. I cried until I couldn't breathe. The next week, I came back to the church. Not to pray. To talk. Sometimes about her. Sometimes about the mess inside me. Sometimes about nothing. And sometimes about him. His name was Eli. The boy I loved in college. The boy who painted murals on protest signs and kissed me behind dorm stairwells. The boy who left when I told him I couldn't face my family. Father Thomas listened. He never judged. He never interrupted. Then one day he said, "You're punishing yourself." I froze. What? For loving someone who made you feel safe. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Don't confuse shame with guilt. Guilt is about actions. Shame is about who you are. And who you are. He looked me dead in the eye. Is not a sin. That was the moment I realized something had changed. Not in him. In me. The hardest part wasn't talking to Father Thomas. It was talking to myself. Because when you grow up being told that God is watching you and that he hates what he sees, you start watching yourself too. Every move. Every thought. Every glance that lingers too long on someone of the same sex. You become both prisoner and warden of your own soul. But the days I spent at the church weren't about sin. They were about healing. One morning, I showed up earlier than usual. The air was crisp, leaves scattered in the courtyard like forgotten letters. I found Father Thomas in the sanctuary, kneeling at a pew. I waited, not wanting to disturb him. Then I noticed he wasn't praying. He was crying. Softly, silently, the way people do when they've carried the weight too long to scream. I didn't know what to do. So I sat in the pew behind him. He didn't move. Just said, "I failed him." I frowned. Failed who? He didn't turn. A boy. Years ago. He came to me after Mass one night. Told me he was confused. Scared. Told me he liked another boy in his youth group. I waited, heart hammering. I told him to pray. That he would find strength in God. I didn't say he was broken. I didn't damn him. But I didn't hold him either. I didn't look him in the eye and say, "You're okay. You're loved." His voice cracked. He killed himself that summer. I felt the wind leave my body. I think about him every day, Father Thomas said. Every sermon I give, I wonder if he would have stayed. If someone had said the right words. He finally turned and looked at me. His face was raw. Honest. Human. "That's why I took off the robe," he whispered. "Because if it stands between me and telling you you're sacred, then it's not holy anymore." Grief is strange. So is forgiveness. I stayed in town longer than I planned. At first, it was logistics. The house needed sorting. The will, the bank accounts, the storage unit. Then it became something else. I started helping out around the church, not in the services, but with the garden out back, the food pantry, the roof repairs. And through it all, Father Thomas gave me space. He didn't push, didn't prod. He let the conversations unfold naturally. But one Sunday afternoon, I asked him a question I had buried for years. Why do people say being gay is a sin? He looked up from the hymnals he was organizing. Because they don't understand love that doesn't look like theirs, he said simply. And the Bible? He nodded. People forget the Bible was written by humans in a different time, in a different culture. It contains truth, but not always fact. And sometimes, it contains the worst fears of the people who wrote it. I looked at him carefully. So you don't think I'm going to hell? He smiled sadly. Son, if loving someone sends you to hell, then heaven is empty. Weeks passed. One night, as autumn curled into the edges of town, I found myself walking the old footbridge near the river. I used to come here with Eli. We carved our initials under one of the beams, a clumsy heart drawn with a pocketknife. I sat down and ran my fingers across the scarred wood. I thought of calling him. But I didn't know what I'd say. So instead, I stood up, took a photo of the carving, and texted it to him. Still here, I wrote. 5 minutes later, 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then came back. Then a reply. You still thinking about me? My breath hitched. Every day, I typed. I wish I'd stayed. A pause. Then. You didn't know how. Neither did I. Where are you now? I asked. 2 hours away. Teaching art. Painting again. Still love you. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I typed. Can I see you? It took another week to work up the courage. I told Father Thomas I was leaving for the weekend. He didn't ask where. Just said, go in peace. So I drove. 2 hours of winding roads and nervous playlists and stopping 3 times to fix my hair like it mattered. And then I was there standing in front of a small apartment, heart galloping in my chest. Eli opened the door before I could knock. He looked older. Softer around the eyes. Still beautiful. We didn't say anything at first. Just looked. Then I said, hi. And he pulled me in. That night, we didn't talk much. We curled into each other like we were made of memory. We didn't make love, not yet. But he held me like he still knew the shape of my shoulders. In the morning, we sat on his tiny balcony, drinking coffee out of mismatched mugs. I'm sorry I left, I said. I'm sorry I let you, he replied. I looked at him. Do you think it's possible to come back from all of it? The shame? The guilt? He nodded slowly. Only if you want something more than punishment. And I did. I wanted joy. I wanted love that wasn't measured against a rulebook. I wanted to believe I could hold another man's hand and still be worthy of kindness. When I returned to town, Father Thomas was in the garden, pulling weeds. You look different, he said. I think I am. Good. I crouched beside him. I want to come back. To the world. To my life. But I don't know how. He handed me a spade. You start small. And you dig. So I did. And the more I dug in the dirt, in my mind, in my heart, the more I found pieces of myself I thought were lost. Winter came early that year. It coated the town in a stillness that made every sound feel like it mattered more. The pews creaked louder. The wind howled through the church eaves like a warning or a prayer. I found myself spending more time in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I was finally learning to listen to the world, to myself, to the parts of me I'd buried so deep even God had to lean in to hear. One day, as snow dusted the chapel windows, Father Thomas said, "Would you consider speaking at the youth group?" I blinked. About what? About what it means to be you. I laughed, a quick, nervous thing. What if I'm not ready? You're never ready for the truth. You just show up anyway. So I did. The room was small, maybe 10 kids, all huddled in folding chairs, some eating snacks, some pretending they weren't nervous. One boy wore eyeliner and sat with his arms crossed, daring anyone to challenge him. A girl with short cropped hair looked like she wanted to disappear. I recognized them. Because I used to be them. I cleared my throat and started. I used to think church was a place where you went to hide the worst parts of yourself. Where you buttoned up your guilt in a nice shirt and hoped no one saw what you were really feeling. They stared at me. No blinking. But the truth is, church isn't supposed to be about fear. It's supposed to be about home. About healing. And if it's making you smaller, quieter, afraid, then that's not God talking. That's someone else's shame. The eyeliner boy gave me the smallest nod. I'm gay, I said. And I used to think that meant I couldn't be loved by God. That I couldn't be part of a church. That my love, the real kind, the messy, beautiful, I want to die with you kind, was something to be punished. I paused. But I met a man who taught me different. And then I told them about Eli. How he painted murals that looked like dreams. How he never flinched when I cried. How he let me fall apart without trying to fix me, just held the pieces with me until I figured out how to hold them myself. When I finished, the room was so quiet you could hear the radiator hum. Then the girl with the short cropped hair whispered, I thought I was going to hell. I looked her in the eye and said, you're not. You're going through it, maybe. But you are not going there. She burst into tears. And suddenly the room wasn't a church basement. It was something holier. That night, I told Father Thomas everything. About Eli. About the bridge. About the way it felt to finally say I love you out loud without flinching. He smiled, not as a priest, but as a man who knew the price of silence. Do you remember what I said when you first walked into this church? He asked. That you thought I expected you to throw me out. He nodded. And do you remember what I did instead? I swallowed. You took off your robe. Not just the robe, he said. I took off the distance. The judgment. The lie that I was any closer to God than you were. He looked at me carefully. Will you do the same? Eli came to visit 2 weeks later. He stood outside the church doors with a nervous smile. I met him at the steps. You sure they're not gonna burn me at the stake? He joked. Only if you start singing Lady Gaga during the sermon. Noted. We sat in the back, holding pinkies under the pew like middle schoolers. No one said a word. Because nothing needed to be said. It was enough that we were there. It was enough that we stayed. The town, of course, didn't change overnight. There were whispers. Cold shoulders at the grocery store. An old man who left a Bible on my doorstep, highlighted in angry yellow. But there were also kids who started coming to the youth group just to listen. There were parents who pulled me aside and asked, how do I not lose my child? There was a woman who brought rainbow cookies to the potluck with a wink. It was slow. But it was real. Then one morning, I arrived at the church and found Father Thomas sitting on the steps. He looked smaller. Older. I'm retiring, he said simply. My chest tightened. What? I'm tired. And there's someone else who can do this better now. I shook my head. No. No, you're the heart of this place. He smiled gently. And every heart eventually needs rest. I sat beside him. You can't leave, I whispered. I'm not, he said. I'm passing it on. It took me a moment to understand what he meant. Then it hit me. You want me to stay, I said. To lead. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. I didn't say yes right away. I told him I needed time. So I drove back to Eli's, stood in his tiny studio while he painted over an old canvas. Do you think I could be a leader? I asked. You already are, he said. You just need to believe it. I kissed him then. Deep and quiet and certain. The next week, I said yes. Not because I had all the answers. But because I was finally brave enough to ask the questions out loud. And that felt like enough. The first sermon I gave was short. I stood in front of maybe 20 people, heart pounding, palms sweating. And I said, I used to think I had to choose between my faith and my identity. Between my love and my God. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe that the God I know doesn't force ultimatums. He just says, come home. I paused. And I'm home. They clapped. Some cried. One old woman stood up and said, about damn time. After the service, Eli met me in the parking lot, holding flowers he clearly picked up from a gas station. You were amazing, he said. I forgot half of what I wanted to say. He shrugged. Didn't matter. You said the thing that counts. We stood in the cold for a while, watching the sun stretch its arms across the frost. Then I turned to him and said, move here. He blinked. What? Move in with me. Let's build something. A life. A home. He smiled like someone who'd been waiting for the permission to hope again. Okay, he said. Just like that. Okay. We renovated the house. Painted the walls bright colors. Hung plants in every room. Turned the guest bedroom into an art studio. And on the front porch, we put up a small sign. Love lives here. Because it did. Because it does. And every Sunday, when I stand at the pulpit, I look out at the pews and see kids who thought they were lost, parents learning to listen, old men learning to apologize. I see Eli, in the third row, sketching in his notebook and smiling like a boy in love. I see the empty seat that used to belong to my mother. And I see Father Thomas, in the very back, watching with a heart that finally let go. And I know deep down, without a doubt, that this is what grace looks like. Not a miracle. Not a thunderclap. Just people who refuse to stop showing up. Spring arrived with slow forgiveness. The dogwoods bloomed like soft confessions, and the air carried the scent of wet soil and fresh beginnings. It had been 6 months since I said yes to staying. To leading. To living without apology. And yet, not a week went by that I didn't question if I deserved it. Some nights I'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring out the window, and whisper things I never had the nerve to pray aloud before. Was I really worthy? Was this what you meant for me? Or did I rewrite your will to fit a softer ending? Eli would stir beside me, half asleep, and mumble, "You're doing it again." Doing what? I'd whisper. Trying to earn what's already yours. That line would stay with me long after he drifted back to sleep. And eventually, I started to believe him. Then, one evening in late May, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. The handwriting was familiar. It was from my father. I hadn't heard from him since the funeral, and even then, he had only stayed 10 minutes before walking out in the middle of Father Thomas's eulogy. He hadn't spoken to me in over 2 years. Inside the envelope were 2 things, a photo and a note. The photo was old me as a kid, maybe 7 or 8, beaming with 2 missing front teeth, standing next to my mom. She had her arm around me and was holding a garden hose, caught mid-laugh. My father had taken that photo. I remembered because he made me laugh right before he snapped it. The note said, "I don't know if you'll believe me. But I'm trying. Your mother saw something in you I couldn't. I was afraid. I still am. But I want to see what she saw. If you'll let me." I read it 3 times. Then I sat in the kitchen for an hour, hands trembling, until Eli came home and found me there. "Is it him?" he asked gently. I nodded. He walked over, kissed the back of my neck, and didn't say a word. Didn't need to. We met at a diner the following week. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Not just in body, but in posture. In the way he held his coffee cup with both hands like it might slip away. He stood when I walked in. I didn't hug him. We sat in the booth by the window, and for 5 minutes, neither of us said a thing. Then finally, he looked at me and said, "You look like your mother." I smiled without meaning to. She used to say that. I didn't understand her. Still don't, some days. She understood you. He nodded slowly. Yeah. Maybe more than I deserved. Another silence. Then he said, "I'm sorry." That was all. Not "I'm sorry you feel hurt" or "I'm sorry things were hard." Just "I'm sorry." And somehow, that was enough. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive him, not right away. But I didn't leave either. He came to church the next month. Sat in the back. Alone. Stiff as a board. He didn't sing. Didn't take communion. But when I stood at the pulpit and talked about mercy, I saw something shift in his face. And after the service, he waited. "I don't belong here," he said. "None of us do," I replied. "That's kind of the point." He didn't smile, but he didn't walk away either. I took that as a win. In July, the town hosted its first Pride picnic. I didn't think anyone would show up. We organized it in the park. Had rainbow streamers, a modest stage, local singers, booths from a few brave vendors. I gave a short speech that started with, "If God is love, then love is not the problem." And to my surprise, the park filled. Families came. Old couples brought lawn chairs. A teenager sang "Born This Way," off-key but proud. And my dad stood in the back, arms folded, nodding along with the music. He didn't talk much that day. But he stayed. He clapped when I kissed Eli on the cheek. He even waved to the eyeliner boy from youth group. That was the day I started to believe that people could change. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But enough. Late that summer, Father Thomas moved to a small cabin upstate. I visited him once before he left. Brought him a basket of tomatoes from the church garden. We sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the sun melt into the hills. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked. "Every day," he said. "But you don't regret leaving?" He smiled. "You don't regret handing someone a torch if you know they'll carry it farther than you ever could." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "I failed a lot of people. I let fear make decisions for me. I watched good kids suffer because I didn't speak soon enough." "You spoke to me," I said. "That mattered." He looked at me with those same pale blue eyes and said, "So speak to others." And I have. Every week since. This morning, Eli painted a mural on the church wall. It's a cascade of hands, brown, white, black, wrinkled, smooth, all reaching toward a bright, impossibly vivid heart. At the bottom, in his signature tiny lettering, it says, "God is in the reaching." I stood beside him while he finished, brush in hand, hair pulled back, freckles lit by the sun. "You think it's too much?" he asked. I shook my head. "I think it's just right." He looked over at me and said, "You ever think we'd get here?" I laughed. "No. But I think she did." "Your mom?" I nodded. "She always saw the end of the road, even when I was still stuck in the thorns." He set down the brush and pulled me close. And we just stood there, two boys who had grown into men who were no longer ashamed of how they loved. I still get letters. Some angry. Some aching. Some anonymous. Most of them say the same thing. I thought I was the only one. To every single one, I write back. You're not. You never were. Come home. And maybe they do. Maybe they walk through our doors one Sunday morning with hearts racing and hands clenched. Maybe they meet someone who says, "You're safe here." Maybe they learn to sing again. Maybe they stay. Because the miracle isn't in the conversion. It's in the return. It's in the boy who thought God hated him, learning to love again. It's in the priest who unbuttoned his robe not to shame, but to say, "I see you." It's in the father who stands quietly at the back of the church, trying to learn a new language of love. It's in the boy who once carved a heart into a bridge, finding the courage to rebuild one out of stained glass and second chances. This is not a story about a church. It's a story about what happens when you refuse to leave yourself behind. It's about staying. It's about love that's loud enough to echo. It's about grace that doesn't ask you to change first. It just asks you to show up. So here I am. Still showing up. Still reaching. Still home. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.